Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is John. If you've not been here before, today I want to go over all the five-star books that I rated 5 stars in 2023 because 2024, crazy enough as it is wrapping up. So these are them, and yeah, I read 51 books, and this is 14 5 stars. What are you doing? So these are them. So we're gonna go through them. I'm gonna set them down because they're gonna fall. Jump up. Let me jump up. Okay. I'm just taking them off the top because they're all gonna topple over. So number one or two. Number one. Raymond Carver. Okay, so this is technically a short story. So Raymond Carver, it is what we talk about when we talk about love. I didn't think I was a short story guy. I'm not gonna lie, but the way this dude writes is, I want to say this is from the 80s, and it's dark. I'm not gonna lie. So one of my favorite kind of genres is like a little bit darker of topics and whatnot. But there are a total of it doesn't. So each short story is like between eight. One's 6 pages, one's 4 pages, one's like 12 or 15. So they're not long. You can kind of just read them as you go. One of my favorites here is what we talk about when we talk about love. The title, "Tell the Women That We're Going," and "Why Don't You Dance" are a couple of my favorites that I just kind of recognize. Didn't realize I was a short story guy, but I loved this. You can look up Raymond Carver. They're not long, and I just recommend them because they just stick with you. I mean, I read this I was right at the front of my book. I always write like when I finished it. So I finished this in September of 2023. I still remember some of these stories, and I loved them. This is easy 5 stars for me. So that's number one. Number two is Ernest Hemingway, who I read a couple books by him this year, The Old Man of the Sea. This won a Pulitzer Prize in like 51 or 52. It's a short book, so if you are not sure about Hemingway, you've never read him, or have never read the book, it's so good, man. So it's a beautiful tale that tells a fundamental human truth in a volatile world, from our first breath to our last, through triumphs and pitfalls, both trivial and profound. What sustains us ultimately is hope. That gives me chills. It's about an elderly man that's a poor fisherman, and he struggles and struggles, and all these fishermen get up at like the crack of dawn, and they go out and they have dry spells, and he's on like a notorious dry spell. I want to say it's like 87 days of not catching anything, and he, as the story as you might guess, he basically hooks a monster of a fish, and the entire book is just basically one story. Like it's just one big chapter. So basically a story of like 125 or so pages of this guy battling himself, battling the sea, battling the fish, and the fish battling him, and the relationship, and like there's a lot of hidden meanings in there. I think it's just a beautiful book. This book I still remember, and that's kind of how we judge 5 star books, right? Like what we can remember. I didn't have to look any of these books up to remind me like what was the characters' names, anything like that. There's a boy in this book, a young boy that kind of takes care of the old fisherman. I mean, for 125 pages, if you haven't read it or read it in a while, I love this book, and I can't wait to read more Hemingway, just at all. But love this book. Number three, The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath. So, like one of like the most early feminist, I guess. Sylvia Plath, like, is known for her poetry and all that. Unfortunately for her demise as well. But this is about a girl named Esther Greenwood, and essentially, from what I remember, without kind of cheating and kind of looking at the back, is that she's a young girl going through life, and women are expected to basically conform to basically male standards. And this is like they're expected to be, I think, what's called a typist, which I think means secretary, right? And that's like the highest level they can attain as a woman. This is where the young woman in the bell jar, I think, is an easy metaphor to kind of figure out. I don't want to spoil it in case you have not read the book, but it's essentially like feeling like claustrophobic in a man's world, and she's obviously depicting uh, the young woman's troubles, and she has friends that kind of play the game, and she doesn't want to, and she's just basically breaks down. And the mental health issues that she kind of comes up with or kind of develops are pretty severe. So I loved it. I thought it was perfect. And if you haven't read it, Sylvia Plath, I think. Oh, and I do. It is in a first-person narrative, so it really like focuses on that. Just remember by looking at the back. But it's just, I think this is the only novel that she wrote. I know a lot of poetry. I'm not sure. Someone could tell me about that. Anyway, number 3. The third book in the MaddAddam trilogy by Margaret Atwood. This is MaddAddam. So my favorite book is the first book in this trilogy called Orcs and Crake. So I don't I'd spoil it basically if I kind of say anything about this book. It's just going to be about it. I love this trilogy. It's still my favorite book, the first one, and the second one and the third one are just as good. This one is just like such an intense. It's a post-apocalyptic, like dystopian future where humans have tried to breed different animals to be efficient, but obviously things go sideways and south, and it's like survivors picking up the pieces, and it's not cheap. It's not that apocalyptic Netflix movie you saw about the end of the world. It's just so well crafted, and Margaret Atwood is one of my favorite writers. And if you haven't given this, I don't see this series talked about enough. If you haven't given it a chance, please give it a chance. At least the first book, Orcs and Crake. And if you don't like it, then I guess, just put it down. But I love this series. This is the third one, the final installment. All right, quick nonfiction book here was The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So I've been in and out of being good at money, how to budget, do stuff like that. Morgan Housel, he's a writer of The Motley Fool, which I follow online, which is like a financial sort of advice kind of website thing. And essentially, this is not a complicated finance book. This is not like The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, which I've leafed through, but this is more that's a complicated book. This is just more timeless lessons of wealth, greed, and happiness. For what it is, it's a basic kind of introduction if you don't understand money, or if you're just you want to understand the psychology of money, where it's just simpler than we all think. And we're not taught this in schools. So I think this is invaluable, especially if you're younger. And even if you're not, I'm 36, and I read this a few years ago, last year. So, I read it in my mid-30s. It's indispensable. Like I said, for what it is, if you're advanced, you won't need it. But if you're just looking for an entry point, it's awesome. It was funny. It was insightful. And it's an easy recommend. I don't know what number we're on. But this is 1984, George Orwell. I know, I probably should have read this years ago. I mean, I loved it. It's just so good. So, any book I read now that is along the Orwellian track or whatever, based on stuff like this, it just, with the exception of Vonnegut's Player Piano, which I read this year, just everything kind of pales in comparison, because it's just so good. There's everything in this book. There's drama, there's tension, there's even romance, and it's just basically, the party, on the blurb it says, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. So there's this dude named Winston who is part of the party, but is obviously questioning it. And it's kind of if you ever heard Big Brother, if you're not familiar with the book, Big Brother means that the government's watching you, right? And it's scary because these days we take the Patriot Act, we take all these things kind of for granted, but or we just assume that's how life is. But it's kind of scary, the parallels. This was written a while ago, before this technology became available, the surveillance and all that, and it pretty much nails it. It's a scary book. And not horror scary, but just scary as the implications, and it gripped me from start to finish, and I think about it a lot. I'm not gonna lie, especially when I was reading Vonnegut's Player Piano this year. I really think of it a lot. It's so good. It's a classic that's completely worth the hype if you haven't read it. Moving on with a drink of Celsius. It's almost 8 p.m., but I'll drink caffeine all day. All right, all right. Stoner, John Williams. I saw this making the rounds of social media in BookTube a while back, but I mean, what not to say about this book? Like, Stoner is something rarer than a great novel. It's a perfect novel, so well told and beautifully written, so deeply moving that it takes your breath away. I mean, it's about a guy named William Stoner, and grows up on a farm. His mom and dad want him to be a farmer, and he's like, no, I want to be. I love literature. I want to be. My dog's running around. she's just playing. Uh, he's in Missouri, but he just wants to be a scholar, academic, be literature, and it follows Stoner across many years. And this dude just like goes through it, man. Like he has just like a rough go of it in so many ways, and he's such an inspiring figure because he's like the epitome of what a man should be, in my opinion. Like he just keeps going in the face of adversity, and he's like this quiet strength, like this strong silent type. And it really is, I think, it is close to a perfect novel as you can get. And I don't think it's overhyped. When I saw it, it's just an easy 5 stars for me. It basically, we're following Stoner throughout when he starts as in school taking classes, and then when he starts working at that actual college that he went to school at. And then there's a war, and some of his friends go off to war and he doesn't. And I mean, it's just it's literary fiction, but it's also it has a great plot and development. So it's just kind of both. It just kind of encompasses everything: character development, plot, just everything. And I'm not going to say it's like a super uplifting book, but it's one that I think everyone should read. It's really, really good. All right, moving on. We've got about halfway through. Shirley Jackson, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I love this book. So Shirley Jackson, if you don't know, she's like The Haunting of Hill House, the Netflix series, and there's a couple other ones that she is the way back author of it, and then obviously the shows are produced off of her work. But the We Have Always Lived in the Castle is about Constance and her sister. And I'll just read the blurb, and like her, Mary Catherine, or Mary Kate, they call her. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I'm 18 years old, and I live with my sister Constance. I've often thought that with any luck at all, I could have been a werewolf because the 2 middle fingers on both my hands are the same length. But I have had to be content with what I've had. I dislike washing myself and dogs and noise. I like my sister Constance and Richard Plantagenet. I don't remember that part. And Amanita phalloides, the death cup mushroom. Everybody else in my family is dead. This is such a good book. So this it follows Mary Catherine, and she comes off as this timid 18-year-old girl that just lives with Constance, her older sister. But there's this air of like her family's dead, and I don't want to spoil anything, obviously, but this is psychological. This is not horror as in jump scares or like you can't sleep at night, at least not for me. It's just, it was so psychological, and I can remember their house in the book so vividly, the way I pictured it in my mind. I can still picture it, which I think is just like a testament to how good the writer is. And she's written a lot of short stories. Shirley Jackson wrote one called The Lottery, which apparently is super, super famous, that I have in my physical TBR way over there. But I haven't read that book yet because it comes with a bunch of other short stories, and I'm not in a short story mood. But anyway, I can remember so many details from this book, and just such intense scenes that I loved it. I know I keep saying I loved it. It's just I'm trying to I don't like to ruin books if people are interested, but there's family dynamics. There's a grandfather involved who survived the moment when basically most of her family died, and it's just, you're piecing together essentially a mystery of what happened, and you think you have an idea of it, and then you're not sure, and you kind of go back and forth. But I wouldn't say it's a whodunit. It's more of a just like it gets into your psyche and just like sticks there, and it's not long. It's like 150 pages or so. This is a cool edition too. This is a Penguins Classic Deluxe edition, and it has like I don't know what they're called, but the pages that are like not even, I forget what those are called, but it's like a nice like strong feeling like, you know, paperback, but like not a hardback, but like kind of feels like one. Moving on. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is a book, so there's a pretty big trigger warning with this book, so look it up if you're going to read it. I got this at like Target, I think, randomly, and then just started reading it, and I loved it from start to finish. It's not an easy read. Again, like my tastes are a little bit like on the, not morose, but just kind of like, or morbid, but like I like the dark themes because I think that's like a lot of what we deal with in everyday life, and I look at this book as uplifting, and essentially it's about a girl named Nora. So her life isn't going well, and then on her last day on Earth, she gets transported to this place called the Midnight Library, and in the Midnight Library, she gets to literally pick off like a volume off the shelf, and there's a librarian anyway who is like her high school librarian, right? So in this dream-like space, she gets to pull a book off, and that's like one of the lives she could have been living. So she gets transported to that life, and she keeps doing this, keeps doing this dozens of times, if not way more. And I mean, it's a book about like it's like a spiritual book. It'll lift your spirits. It'll kind of like get you down and then bring you back up, and it'll give you a lot of perspective, I think, on how just how things are in life, and like how we tend to, not the word, I'm trying to find the word, like how we tend to, I don't know, process things maybe, and it's just it's tough at times, and it's sort of like we all wish we could like redo, or like we have regrets, we wish we could like, you know, like do them over again, and this book is kind of like that, like what would happen if you could. Good book, great book. All right, getting there. So another short story collection, Chuck Klosterman. So Raised in Captivity. This is, it's called fictional nonfiction. So essentially it's fictional, like it's fiction, but these stories are so close to real life, and Chuck Klosterman is funny. I picked this up off of Barnes and Noble, like a table, and I had never heard of this guy before, but it had like a funny like little skeleton with like a chain or a leash or something around its neck. And it's short stories. It's very unlike Raymond Carver, but it's essentially short stories of like these very applicable modern day. It's a recent book. Stories that are fictional, but very very well could be real. And some of it's like you're like, oh, I get what he's doing there, and some of it's kind of a little bit more ambiguous, or it's very funny, and it's very real. If you're into that kind of thing, I recommend this one. All right, we have 4 to go. Franz Kafka, The Metamorphosis. I had never read Kafka before. With all these famous authors, what I do is I try to find their shortest work if I haven't read them before. And Kafka, this was it, Metamorphosis. So this is a novella, I guess. Yeah, it's like 86 pages, right? So this is about a dude named Grigor who lives with his family. There's like a big family, right? You want to come on my lap? You want to come over here? Come here. Okay. So he wakes up as a bug. Like he wakes up as like an insect. And he's just like laying on his back, and all of a sudden he's like this big insect with like this big shell, and he has to like maneuver himself. And his boss is upset because, good little girl. His boss is upset because, you coming over? Come on. She can't decide whether she wants to come over or not. So his boss is upset that he like isn't at work. So he's staying in his room. He's freaked out because he's turned into a bug, right? He's like a young guy. He's providing for his family and his parents, and he has, I think, a sister. And it's kind of like, come on, pup. Come on. Okay, come on, big girl. Come on. There's a doggy. So he's providing for, she's getting sick of me doing it. So, his like, so this is very psychological, and there's a lot of symbolism that you can probably understand, but his family dynamic, I'll say, is strained. And it's just one of these things where it's like, you know, you do everything you can, and sometimes it's appreciated and sometimes it's not. And this guy just struggles and struggles, and it really goes into the dynamics of everyday life, of work, of like the meaning of work or meaning of life or meaning of family. And it was a perfect introduction to Kafka because I read The Trial by Kafka this year, 2024, and I think if I hadn't read this first, I would have been kind of mixed on what I thought about The Trial, but I see what he's doing, and I love his writing, and I like The Trial too. So The Metamorphosis is a very good book. All right, top three. Well, not top three, last three. So, Maya, why don't you sit down, pup? Why don't you sit down? Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte. So, Bronte. So, the Bronte sisters, this is the only Bronte book I have. Maya, can you sit? Maya, you sit down. Sit, sit down, sit down. No, doesn't want to sit down. I have not read Wuthering Heights, and I have not read anything else by Charlotte Bronte or her sister Emily Bronte. I love this book. So I read Pride and Prejudice also last year. For me, it's an easy Jane Eyre. I read Pride and Prejudice, and it was very classic-y. It was very like the sentences were long, and it was like, I know it sounds kind of lame, but like they were long, and it was like a lot of commas. It was tough to get through, and I liked it. But when I read Jane Eyre, it was much easier to read, and it felt more modern, I guess, and the story was great. And there was still the element. It was basically a similar story, and it follows the arc of a girl named Jane Eyre who grows up an orphan and spends time in a home that's not so great to her when she's young. And she goes up and she goes to a girls' boarding school. She has to figure out her way there. Like, how does she fit in? She doesn't really have a family to fall back on. And it follows her throughout. And she always describes herself as like homely and unattractive. And she kind of is a downer on herself, essentially. But over the book, she's just like a hard worker. She's, what's the word? Industrious. She just keeps going. She's persevering. She just keeps going. And she never really stops. And eventually, there's a love interest towards the end of the book. I thought it was a great classic to start with, and I like that I read Pride and Prejudice first because out of the two books, I had heard better things actually about Pride and Prejudice, and I read them in that order. But this to me is an easy better book, and I also like this edition. It's got the cool like tree on the front, which has meaning if you've read the book or if you will read the book. And it's a Reader's Digest hardcover edition, so I like that. All right, two more. Nonfiction again. This is a memoir. So this is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I love Matthew McConaughey. What's cool about this, it has a lot of neat artwork. I take the dust jackets off. I don't like those. So this dude is like the most interesting dude ever. So like I've always liked him as an actor, but like Green Lights is like what he like says is like an indication for you to like go out and get it, right? We all do that. Like we don't go out and grasp things, like we just wait, and we wait too long. And this guy kept a journal before journaling was trendy. Matthew McConaughey's like in his mid-50s now. He wrote this at 50. He kept a journal since he was like 15 years old. And a lot of like the experts in here are literally like in the front, especially, but throughout the book are actually pictures of his journals. And it's chicken scratch. You can hardly read it, but he would like study them, and just he's like this very likable, like worldly guy. He still teaches at his alma mater, which I think is Texas A&M. Normally, I do not like memoirs because they're done by celebrities and they're usually ghost written. And this might have been ghost written, but I think I get the feeling it wasn't. I get the feeling it was more like a co-written type thing, but very kind of inspiring, just like a very likable guy, very honest. And it's not a self-help book by any stretch, but it was just a really enjoyable read. And I've only read a couple memoirs in Memoirs defense, but I just don't think it's my genre, and I don't know why I picked this one up, but I'm really, really glad I did. Big McConaughey fan. If you're into McConaughey, I think it's one of the best memoirs you can read. I don't, but like it's really good. All right, last book is, I took the dust jacket off, but is Kazuo Ishiguro's Clara and the Sun. I love Ishiguro. I've read 3 or 4 of him now, and Clara and the Sun. it's about a narrator named Clara, and she is an artificial friend, or AF, which has a different meaning in modern terms, but it means artificial friend. And Ishiguro, if you don't know, Ishiguro is known. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017 or 2018. He's known for his narration. So his characters have this uncanny narration where they just draw you in. And it's not different with Clara. So she's sitting in a window full of other AFs, or artificial friends, and there's this girl Josie that comes in the shop and kind of catches her eye. And the whole point of an artificial friend is to provide friendships for presumably children. So this Josie girl is sick and she wants an artificial friend, and Clara is like a model, I think, like just behind the newest models that that came out. Like there's like basically like different software versions. I mean, the second I started reading it, it's one of those books where I just couldn't put it down, and it was just very profound to me, and it was very much a good reflection of our society and our obsession with technology and AI and smartphones, and how we're reliant on that, and it kind of dug into a possible future where it's less about what you know and more about how you handle technology, and the connections you have. And there's a couple other kind of dark themes in there too, where it kind of catches you off guard. So without saying too much, it basically it's Clara and Josie, and Clara is meant to guide Josie throughout her life and provide that friendship and mentorship, and be something that the young girl can kind of rely on. Ishiguro, like, just if you don't know who he is, like, look him up. But I've read a bunch of other of his books, and the narration, I love him. He's up there with my favorite authors, next to like Margaret Atwood and Hemingway. It's really, really good, and I would say the easiest Ishiguro book I've read so far to recommend is Clara and the Sun, because it's the most recent one, but it's so universally kind of known. The other books I've read by him are a little more niche, I think, if I had to say. I mean, I would also recommend those if I'm being just straight up, but this one is the definite. Clara and the Sun is definitely the first one I would recommend. Yeah, I had to think about that for a moment. But anyway, so that is this is already a long video, so if you stayed till the end, I mean, thank you. That'd be pretty cool. So I hope that maybe you got a recommendation out of one of those 14, I believe that was. Those are my 5-star books from 2023. I've read a lot of 5-star books in 2024, so I'm excited to kind of, maybe add one or two of those by the end of the year and then share them in 2024. But that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna get out of here now and drink some more caffeine probably. So I'll see you in the next one. All right. Bye. Peace.